Welcome everyone. My name is Doug Schofield. I am a Senior Partner Technical Specialist with IBM Global Sales. And I want to spend the next few minutes talking at a high level about IBM's offerings and solutions in the area of data resiliency. It's certainly a topic that's on the mind of every single one of our customers. The wonderful thing, if we're a seller right now, we can be pretty certain that there's almost nobody when you bring up the topic of safeguarded copy. Are they going to say, gee, we don't need anything, or gee, we're not really worried about that? That just doesn't exist anymore. It's one of the most uppermost things on everyone's mind these days. So the nice thing is, this is a topic that is very timely, very easy to bring up, and on top of that, IBM's developed solutions really are best of breed in a way that nobody else can come in the door with. And we want to talk a little bit about the ins and outs of that, at least at a high level, so you can get a sense of what you might go forward to your customers with your IBM bag in hand. Now, we always start with these conversations, and sometimes they feel a little bit like they are unnecessary. But I really do think that the more we get into this and the more detailed the information that we get to be able to tell our customers about what the impact is around us, the more we can drive home the point of we really do need to be talking about this. All right, so we talk about lost revenue. Lost revenue can mean so many different things. Obviously, the ransom itself, if they have to pay it. The question then becomes, what additional ancillary expenses are they going to incur? Are they going to lose revenue? Are they going to lose the ability to generate revenue from their customer base? Very, very possible. Are they going to have to spend additional money outside the business in having outside consultants come in to assess the situation to help them and recover from the situation because they were insufficiently prepared internally? That is certainly a very real situation. Now, the numbers here are numbers that are noteworthy. The average time it takes to fully recover, to get back to operational stability from a ransomware attack, is 23 days, the average, which means a great many people go significantly longer than that 3+ weeks average. And what company these days can withstand that? It's a very, very pertinent topic. And then the average cost per attack, 4.62 million, figuring out the totality of the cost. Once again, it's just the average, which implies that many people go through considerably higher costs on attacks as well. So when you start talking about the costs of solutions, it's important to have that as a backdrop, because it certainly eases the pain of introducing costs to put in a resilient solution. The questions that we want to be asking and make sure that the customers are asking of themselves is, firstly, how long would it take, based on your current posture, to get back to operational stability for your mission critical data? And we want to make that segregation here, because there's certainly layers of recoverability here. But in order to get your mission critical data back online, how much time are we talking about? Do they have a real estimate of that, and what is that estimate based on? Do they have immutable copies somewhere in their enterprise? Do they have copies that cannot be written to, that they can use as the basis for first validation and then recovery? And very importantly, I've had people tell me they test their recoverability religiously. They test it on Easter and they test it on Christmas. That's not enough these days. I mean, it has to be scripted, it has to be planned, it has to be regularly tested. But the truth of the matter is a lot of this conversation is policy oriented. What is IBM adding to the solution as regards technology? Right? That's where you can walk in the door knowing that IBM's got a key differentiator these days in this space. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about IBM's concept of how we make the very, very difficult topic of data resiliency much more simple than perhaps some people might think. The first thing that we have to do, the table stakes, involve having the ability to recover. Now, 2 years ago, that was nirvana. All right, that was, okay, We know that if we get attacked, if somebody puts a bill in front of us and says, we will not give you back your data, access to your data unless you give us a check for X. That was the biggest deal a couple years ago. These days, it's pretty much table stakes. All right, we need to first know that we have the ability to recover. That implies more than technology. It implies that we have a test and recovery plan in place so that we have already rehearsed that scenario when it happens. This particular slide goes into specific solutions and how they vary in their approach to being able to recover here. Right. Some of them use traditional worm media and use full physical air gapping technologies to get that done. Sometimes that's what's needed, depending on the size of the company, depending on the budget. So sometimes you can't go for all the bells and whistles. Well, we want people to know that IBM has solutions for them as well. So we can certainly start there on the lower end of the flash systems family and provide a solution based on that. We're going to talk just a little bit more about that in a bit. Anything with flash systems 5200 and higher, this is where the game changes, right? Because now we have a solution called safeguarded copy, which allows us to create nearline, logically air-gapped, immutable snapshots. All right, and once again, we'll talk just a little bit about that concept as well as we go into it. But the fundamental thing we want to remember there is that all of a sudden, since the snapshot, since the immutable copy is on the array, it is protected from the hacker, and it will give you the ability to recover in hours instead of days or weeks. That all by itself, I guarantee you, as soon as you bring that up, it's going to be very, very quickly, the conversation is going to move to, all right, how do you do that? How do you do that? You know, what about this? What about that? What about the other? That's good. You're going to open a can of worms at that point, and that's what you want to do. So that's the first part of the conversation. All right, so as we say, what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we can recover rapidly with absolutely minimal impact to the business, impact to the business's reputation. So that's a key element of what we're trying to, the messaging we're trying to put forward here is that it's not just about being able to recover, it's being able to recover in as pain-free a way as we possibly can. Now, that implies that we've got regular testing and validation against our snapshots to make sure they are indeed viable copies for recovery. Now, that has a subsidiary implication, and we talk about this notion of enabling remote recovery. I may very well decide that a logically air-gapped pool residing on my same array, it's great, I want that capability, but it's insufficient in its totality to meet our security thresholds. Once I have established that I've got a process in place to validate my copies, those copies can now become the source of additional operations, which is to say, I can now do that physical air gapping against my snapshots and make sure that I've got both ends of it covered. I've got the speed end and I've got the fully safeguarded end to this conversation covered. And I can then move it to what? Move it to tape. I can move it to a cloud-based instance. I can move it to another safe location to give me even more protection against this. All right, so to summarize what we just talked about here, the things that make the return to production as fast as possible are two simple things, two simple concepts anyway. The first is that the protected copy needs to be located on the primary array, and a lot of our competitors, what they do in this space is they'll provide a network path to my immutable copy, which is certainly a way to do it, but whenever you add that network element into the picture, then you're slowing down your recovery time. Only IBM presently offers this in a logically air-gapped solution on the array itself. Right, that's the first piece. The second is that we must be proactively, regularly, vigilantly validating this data to make sure that it is indeed recoverable. Right, that is the second thing. And that implies process, it implies tools to help with that process, because that's a very, very labor-intensive situation if I don't automate. So we're going to talk a little bit about both ends of that. And we have two solutions that lead into both of those stories. So we've got when bad things happen to your data. All right, the very first thing we've got is IBM's safeguarded copy. This is the solution that we've been talking about here that allows this immutable data to live right there on the array. Your hacker can't see it, can't get at it. You can take snapshots at whatever interval normally you would take. You can also take snapshots as the result of an event. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about more when we get into CyberVault, but certainly it is a much, much faster process than anything else currently out there as regards capability to recover. Once we have that in place, then the harder work begins, because to put safeguarded copy in place, it exists on every IBM Spectrum virtualized based solution from Flash Systems 5200 right up to the top, and including SAN volume controller. It's basically just a flick of a switch, and you can set up your safeguarded copies either on the flash system itself or anything that is hosted behind that flash system. We know about storage virtualization. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that here, but those additional capacity resources can be used as part of this safeguarded copy. Now, I've got the snapshot. Great, I'm all set, right? No, not even close. We need to be able to regularly validate that data to make sure, and that has a lot of implications, because when we say validate that data, that could mean any number of things. It depends on what it is. Is it an Oracle database? Is it an SAP HANA database? Is it a MongoDB? Each one of those will have a process around validating that it is recoverable. The way that we can start to address that using an IBM solution is using IBM's Flash Systems CyberVault. And it allows you to build all of your policies, all of your automation into a single location. And it also allows integration to other key elements of your data protection operation so that you can use them hand in hand in fighting off cyber attacks. Let's talk just a little bit about that. So here we have creating with safeguarded copy. We're going to just regularly create snapshots that are automatic, they are immutable, they are logically air-gapped, and the snapshots are lightning fast. So you can do them pretty much as often as you want. All right. You may have, snapshots that go back for a week, 2 weeks, a month, depending on what your particular customer's service level need is there. That's fairly, the concept is fairly straightforward. Certainly the ins and outs of how we do it is going to be one of the main areas your customers are going to care about. Beyond that, we get into the conversation of CyberVault. So we start with these immutable copies that are created by safeguarded copy. We take then that and apply proactive monitoring to that environment. Storage Insights is the de facto standard when it comes to monitoring block storage at IBM, and so it will give you a regular update on exactly what's going on in your environment, if there's anything unusual going on there. You can also tie this in with your security, the pre-boom conversation. For example, with IBM QRadar. QRadar detects unusual activity as regards malicious attacks. It can speak directly to CyberVault and initiate a safeguarded copy at that moment to make sure that if indeed it turns out to be a malicious attack, you've got the most current saved data to be able to recover. All right. Now, validation of copies is going to involve a lot of automation. One of the ways that we recommend looking at this is certainly through our own Red Hat acquisition. Let's look at Ansible here. All right, Ansible, the open standard as regards runbooks, the ability to build processes, repeatable processes, so that I don't have to do them manually. It's an absolutely crucial element of this conversation. We want to test recovery procedures. We want to test them for each type of data that we've got going here, and we want to make sure that we're validating as often as we think we need to, which probably is pretty often these days. All right, and then we want to be able to, once we've got that all in place, we are ready to engage in rapid recovery and return the business to full operation. All right, that's just a high level on CyberVault. Now, I want to spend a minute talking about the various levels of solutions. We kind of alluded to this earlier. I'm not going to spend much time here, but what we can do is this is for customers that are not ready for the full-on flash core modules, the the expense associated with it. And you'll see it's really, it's pretty reasonable. And you can walk in very confidently knowing you've got a solution that is going to give them a lot of value with not very much pain to the pocketbook. So this first solution is a traditional backup solution where we're using some sort of external immutable copy, whether it's tapes, whether it's immutable disk media, whether it's up in the web, to give you that protection that folks need. But this is fairly basic, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. The point here I want to make, again, put a couple of these. These are not quotes, all right? These are to give you sense of orbit of cost here. So in this case, we're talking about a flash system 5015, which is the low guy on the totem pole. 76 terabytes with the appropriate data movement software, with the appropriate management software, with the appropriate network connectivity, with the actual setup of the equipment. That's the price. All right. It does not include lab services. It does not include any capacity from IBM Cloud or any other cloud for remote replication. You need to build that in, but certainly it gives you a starting point to have a conversation with the customer. Now, 71.6 terabytes turns into 159, and the price only goes up $5 grand. All right. So it's very much a very economical solution. Now, if I jump to the still entry level, but getting into the FlashCore module family of solutions, all right, I do that here and I go up to $61,000. But now I'm talking FlashCore modules. Now I'm talking about, importantly, we talk about the usable capacity with the FlashCore module 3-to-1 guarantee. So we've got 84 terabytes of effective space out of this guy for $61K with FlashCore. Now you're talking, and once again, the data movement is built in here, the management is built in here, certainly the hardware itself is built in here. All right, we move up to 113 terabytes, and now it's 340 effective, 150 grand. That's still, remember what we talked about 4.6 million? If I can spend 150 grand to protect myself from 4.6 million, that's a pretty good bargain these days. Right? We will be very, very financially palatable to your customers compared to what your competition is coming in and talking about. All right, that is at a high level the IBM data resiliency story. I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to your Ingram micro contacts, and they should be able to give you a full briefing, and as necessary they will pull in IBM people as well, and we will be able to get you where you need to be with your customers to have this conversation. I thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations today.